Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for the full moon in Pisces, which is happening on September 13th or 14th, depending on where you live in the world. By the way, if you hear any kind of buzzing sound, those are the locusts, and I think the crickets are with them, and they are always very active around dusk. And I'm recording this at 6:53 p.m. Central Standard Time in the United States, and apparently we're getting almost close to dusk, believe it or not, because of the fact that we're losing hours. So in any case, I want to talk about the energy surrounding this full moon in Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And so that represents the 12th house in astrology, in the universal astrological chart. So there's a sense of closure with full moons as it is, but then we have it in the final sign. So something ending in all of our lives. And if you have a mutable personal planet around the degree of 21 of Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Gemini, this will affect you the most. And there, you can just add a few degrees in either direction. So I don't have Cafe Astrology's information up, because I did read where they were talking about what the orb was, or the distance in degrees where this is most apparent. I would assume it's about 3 degrees either way. So perhaps, or maybe even 4 degrees, 17 to 24 degrees of any of those points. But everyone can feel the effects in one way or the other. And the particularly interesting thing about this, besides the fact that Pisces is the final sign, is the fact that we have a conjunction with transiting Neptune in its own sign of Pisces. So the Piscean energy is very strong at this time. And let's talk about what Pisces energy or Neptunian energy represents, because it's important to really pinpoint exactly what this may entail for all of us. And one of the biggest key words that I can think of is fantasy. Another one could be illusion, delusion, mysticism, ecstasy that comes from the merging with the divine. The 12th house is the collective soul. So all of us are individuals, but we all are drops of God in the ocean of God, right? Or at least, I do resonate with that idea. And this is what the 12th house represents. So it's not about these boundaries of the individual, which we would associate more with the first house and Aries, the first sign. This is about no boundaries. That I think about the song that John Lennon wrote. I am the walrus. I am he is, she is me, and we are all together, or however he put it. Something along those lines. And that was what he was trying to convey, I believe. And it's hard sometimes to really feel that, isn't it? We tend to live in our own heads, and we don't tend to really feel that we are connected with others that much. I think nowadays more than others. But there are certain things that seem to connect us. And it's interesting that I'm recording this on 9/11, because I remember very clearly where I was and what I was doing on that day. And this was before I ever had internet available all the time. And I remember, it was less than 20 years ago, but it was at a time when the news organizations were still considered the go-to sources compared to how they are nowadays. And I remember just lying in front of that television for 2 days straight, barely getting up, and just soaking it all in, living so many miles away, probably, close to 1,000 miles away. But I think that that was one of those things that we all felt. I don't think, just in the United States, I'm sure people around the world also felt connected to this event. And it doesn't matter the different theories about the event. It matters that it occurred and that people felt a sense of tragedy, and that connected us. And Pisces is a sign that connects with suffering. So a lot of times if you have personal planets in Pisces, or if you have, especially with personal planets connected to Neptune, but just in general, if you have a lot of Neptunian contacts, Neptune being the ruler of Pisces, you can have abilities in, you can have psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, and have an empathic nature. And even if you have what are called easy angles like trines and sextiles, or even conjunction, which is considered neutral in a lot of cases, it can still be challenging sometimes because of the nature of Neptune. Neptune and how it, throws fairy dust on the things that we are thinking about and maybe planning our plans, our perceptions, and our interactions with others. And if you know people who tend to see the world with rose-colored glasses, in other words, we're not talking about optimism, but we're talking about they don't see things as they really are. And of course, reality is relative, but you know what I mean. They sometimes will weave together fantasies or alternative facts that demonstrate that they do not want to face the truth. This is very Neptunian, and if you look at their chart, you may see that they have hard angles to Neptune, from Mercury to Neptune, or the Moon to Neptune, or what have you, or Venus, if this is a love affair. Venus. It's very difficult to kind of deal with people who are like this, because you can try to convince them of the quote-unquote truth and get absolutely nowhere. And they'll dig in their heels even further. Moon in Pisces is a big one. But let's talk about what else is going on there a lot of times. For instance, if somebody has the sun or moon or other personal planet in Pisces, there is great empathy. And that is one of the traits of Neptune, is seeing beyond the mundane reality into the higher perspective. Actually, Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces, and Jupiter is about the bigger picture. So, and there's that spiritual connection, because that is what wisdom is about. Anybody can have knowledge and facts, be armed with facts. But it doesn't really get into why people do what they do, and, the empathy, which is the basis for spiritual understanding of others. And so these are the types of people, Venus and Pisces, who almost fall in love with other people's pain bodies in a lot of ways. They can see that pain body front and center, and where that would repel other people, they will fall in love with it because they're natural healers. So this is a very healing full moon. And, forgiveness is another facet of Pisces that comes into play here. And a lot of times, there's a Christ-like tendency with people who have these contacts to Neptune, these, Pisces personal placements. That sounds like a tongue twister. And so they can have that compassion at the deepest level. But here's the rub. A lot of times these same people do not have compassion for themselves, do not realize that compassion goes two ways. That what you give to others, you must give to self. No exceptions. And that means that you do not tolerate abuse, disrespect. You understand it, but you don't tolerate it. You can still acknowledge somebody as a human being and say to yourself, this person isn't safe for me to be with, even on the emotional level. People who are very giving, and this is another facet of this full moon, is that it's an opposition between Virgo, the sun in Virgo, and the moon in Pisces. And both of these signs are associated with giving and helping. Virgo in the more practical sense, and Pisces in the spiritual sense, the mystical, the healing sense. We need both because we live in the material world. Ultimately, you might say that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but we are here. So we can't deny the physical in favor of the spiritual, and vice versa. We can't deny the spirit. Did I say the spiritual and we can't deny the spiritual and focus on the physical, nor the physical, nor deny the spiritual or the physical, both. Let's put it that way. I think it's already starting, and the confusion is ramping up a little bit. But the point is that, I think of the Temperance card. The angel has one foot in the water, the spiritual, one foot on land, the material. That's actually a perfect symbol for this full moon in Pisces, because you have the earth and the water. And Temperance, the balance between the two. So let me talk a little bit about what is really going on here. We have a situation where Venus is at the last degree of Virgo, the critical degree, 29th degree. Venus is poised to go into Libra, the sign that it rules. I think this is a very romantic full moon. Neptune is retrograde, so even though it's forming a conjunction with the full moon, because it's retrograde, this may actually be more like revealing the truth than it is about bewitching you. And there's a heightened sense of emotions, obviously, that are taking place, because Pisces is the last water sign. And so, suffice it to say, We usually feel emotional during a full moon. I'm recording this a few days ahead of time, and I'm already getting weepy. Who knows if that's the reason, but I wouldn't be surprised. Overly sentimental, and but you can have a lot of psychic experiences, dreaming. If you're the kind of person that dreams a lot, Neptune, Pisces, the 12th house, is all about dreaming. And, because that's one form of divination and contact with the non-material world. Some people have very prophetic dreams, and so that could certainly be heightened. But I have a feeling that a lot of this is personal to you, to me, to all of us, that we're being, we're going to find out something about ourselves rather than about others, because this is the time during a full moon where secrets can be revealed. But I feel that the secret that is going to be revealed is something that maybe we were in denial over, and now it's just there for us to see. And the interesting thing about this is the fact that the moon, the moon is in conjunction with Neptune, making you very connected to the spiritual, but at the same time, like I said, with the opposition from the sun, there is that tendency to kind of project stuff onto other people. There's actually a bunch of oppositions. The full moon itself is an opposition. It's always the sun the sun opposing the moon. But in this particular month, we have the moon opposing Mercury. That can lead to kind of projections, putting your emotions onto somebody else's words. And, because of what you feel, how people do this, where somebody says something, it's almost like they have to walk on eggshells, because the person reads into things that are not there because they're triggered emotionally. And instead of owning that, they blame. I think blame is a big part. With Pisces, it can be guilting. It can be emotional manipulation. The moon is opposing Mars. Whenever you have a hard angle from the moon to Mars, there can be anger. Now, because the moon is in Pisces, it may be softened a little bit. Again, it might be manipulation. Look at what you made me do. It's your fault. Not owning up to one's own attitudes and, behavioral patterns. We have an opposition from the moon to Venus. And this can lead to kind of like a seesaw effect, where the person is either very overly, attached to somebody and kind of detached. And people who have felt abandonment in their life may really try to guilt others and accuse them of not caring enough. And that is one of those things that, can lead to breakups, blow-ups and breakups, because full moons can bring on a crisis something can come to a head. And because it's an emotional, I mean, it's already emotional being a full moon, but in a water sign, the last water sign, it's like the collective karma kind of catching up to us. And I mean, it can play out in the collective, I mean, in world events, the sense of a buildup of, some kind of a crisis. But also in our personal lives where something has to give, where it's like there is this sense of we're at the end here. Pisces is the last sign. So what I was saying earlier is that a person who has a strong Neptune signature, either because of Pisces planets or because of Neptune contacts or combination thereof, can be very sensitive to the needs of others, but not to their own needs. And that Christ complex can lead to martyrdom very easily. And that doesn't serve anyone. You will see these same people maybe being passive aggressive, maybe hinting at their long-suffering nature. Manipulation is an indirect form of trying to get your needs met. And speaking about, when I was talking about this idea of forgiveness, I think this is all about forgiving yourself. Get off the cross. You can stop punishing yourself. The 12th house, the house that Neptune rules, the house that Pisces rules, is the house of prison and hospitals, places where people suffer. End your suffering. End your suffering through compassion for self, through self-love. You are not guilty, even if you did something wrong. You are spotless. You are pure. You are innocent. And that's one of the main things that I want to convey here. Looking at, what kind of manifestation can occur. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Mars, which suggests ambition, oddly enough, and also really great, like aces across the board. Looking at the context to Pluto. Sun trine Pluto, sextile Moon to Pluto, Mercury trine Pluto, Venus trine Pluto, Mars trine Pluto, and Saturn trine Pluto. And also Neptune sextile Pluto. Pluto is about power and will. And actually, I was going to say, will is a form of power, and you think willpower, And so this is great for somebody who is trying to make something happen. Now, typically, it is not advised, or, I almost don't like to say this because some people may be chomping at the bit to launch something. And supposedly at the time of the full moon, this is the culmination of past efforts. And so, this is the waning, the next 2 weeks will be the waning period. And the new moon period, starting on the 28th, is supposed to be more for the action taking. Well, you determine what is right for you. Don't allow the matrix to control you. If you feel called to launch something, it's probably a very potent, magical time for it. But definitely for bad habits, this is amazing. And I just want to say about habits, because the addictions are connected to both, I would say, Pluto and the 12th house, or Pisces and Neptune. Neptune is the planet of escapism, and addictions are considered a form of escapism, which makes a lot of sense. But I would add here that, and Pluto is the ruler of the 8th house, along with Mars, and deals with the shadow side, the things that we feel, compulsions, obsessions, and addictions can fall into that category too. I actually think that addictions are a form of OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, where somebody fixates on something. And really, I believe the ultimate reason for addictions is to take the focus away from pain. Not just to escape pain, but to have this new obsession that supersedes everything. And so when I said the term bad habits, I didn't like that feeling, because you know what? They can serve a purpose while they are happening. They can be there and have a reason, and even have a benefit, even though I don't recommend that people engage in addictive behavior. If you have it already, the answer isn't to hate yourself or hate what you're doing. The answer is to love yourself and look at what you're doing as a way that you're attempting to cope and to make yourself feel better, and so your heart is in the right place. It may not be something that is benefiting you ultimately. It may be incredibly destructive, and it could be very life-threatening in some cases. But your goal is to be able to make yourself feel better. A lot of times, in addition to trying to kick a bad habit, there I said it again, to kick a habit, a person will feel self-loathing and shame. And I guess that's a form of self-loathing in a way. And they think that they can motivate themselves by feeling this way. And negative motivation is not how it really works. When you come from a place of acceptance and you realize that what you're doing is the best that you know how to do in this moment, but you want to learn a better way, then you make space for positive emotions to be injected into the situation. I wanted to also just briefly say something about the tarot cards that I know. I was looking it up. I couldn't find all of them that are connected to, that I know are connected to either Neptune or Pisces. And the ones I can say in the major arcana, the moon card is connected to Pisces. Now the moon rules Cancer, but it's connected, this card is connected to Pisces. And in the tarot, the moon card is connected to deception, addiction, lunacy, the moon, Luna, lunatic, creativity, fantasy, and fantasy doesn't have to be bad. And what else? I mean, there's other things that the moon represents. Secrets and things like that. And the other major arcana card is the Hangman. And that is connected specifically to Neptune. But Neptune is a ruler of Pisces, so. Anyway, the Hangman is a card of feeling like in limbo. So when you think of Neptune, you think of confusion sometimes, and perhaps a sense of, not being clear on one's direction, maybe. And so the Hangman is about feeling like you have to wait for some reason. It's also a card of surrender, which we can talk about with Pisces, that sense of the person who sacrifices for the greater good or for one other person rather than themselves. That selfless quality. And in the minor arcana, the two cards that I think of off the top of my head are the Seven of Cups, which is connected specifically to Neptune. This can be a card of having multiple choices, but feeling a sense of confusion, maybe being a bit deluded in what you're dealing with, what your choices are, thinking that something is a good situation when it's not, something that you might choose for yourself. And the Page of Cups, which is a card of innocence, the child, and gullibility, sometimes being very trusting, over-trusting, trusting the wrong person maybe, who knows. So it's interesting because these are the themes that we can discuss about Neptune and Pisces that may come up for you in one way or the other. But again, I think that it's going to all come down to you, because Neptune is retrograde, and you're going to, even if you hear a secret, let's say, about your relationship, rather than, sometimes I think that there might be projection where people just, because out of force of habit, that they just automatically blame others for what's happening. That may occur, but I think eventually you'll have to accept your own responsibility in the situation. And that can lead to a feeling of self-empowerment, first and foremost. Because I think that if you forgive yourself, then you let yourself off the hook. And then you don't have to stay in a relationship because you feel this sense of guilt and you have no idea where it's coming from. You feel like the sense of obligation or the sense of guilt, and then that disappears. And you can see the situation for what it really is. If it's a situation that is hurting you, then you're going to be much less likely to just write it off. You may even feel a sense of urgency to take action with the Sun in conjunction with Mars. I don't think it will be impulsive. I think it's more bold action. So we will see what the shakeout is from this full moon. If it's, one thing I didn't say at the beginning, in the Northern Hemisphere, this is the harvest moon. And I really do feel like this is like some kind of a harvest of this year. And kind of like reaping the whirlwind, because Pisces is associated with karma, being of the 12th house. So okay, what are my just desserts? And, this is not just in terms of how we treat others, but how we treat ourselves. So I just wanted to kind of give that angle of how I perceive this. And I wish all of you a very blessed full moon, and I might do a tarot reading for this as well, or an oracle reading perhaps. I'll see, how I feel about that. But take care. Bye.